Hey guys. So in this video, I'm going to go over the sound design that I did for a challenge track on the Viantria Discord server. We were tasked with basically creating some music using only the samples provided in the sample pack. And this was a bunch of random things, different keys, different kinds of sounds. I'll go ahead and play those sounds just to get a kind of baseline. And then I'll show you how I process them and turn them into various different instruments, percussion, and whatnot. So here's what all the sounds sound like together. Okay, so that was all of them. So we'll start kind of at the top, starting with the basses. These are probably what took the most amount of time and processing. So first we have this kind of sustained bass sound. Which I used mainly for, a couple of fills, but I also used it during this section here as, the primary bass. So I use a template that I built for designing basses. It really just kind of splits things up into a couple of different layers. We've got a mid plus noise layer, and then we have a dedicated sub. And these are key tracked with some filters, which I guess I forgot to connect on this one. Whatever. This is the sub layer. And then for the mid and noise, those are also two different layers. One is dedicated to the noise, and then another one is for the mids. With the mids, you can really go crazy and have a lot of spatial effects to make things wider and more distorted. The noise is there if I want the additional kind of grit and texture to go on top. And then, of course, the sub is dedicated for the sub. So we'll kind of go through these one at a time, starting with the sub. You can see I'm using the sample from Rafa, which was kind of a flute sound. So that's kind of the original sound. And what I'm doing is I'm really just taking a small snippet and setting it to loop. And this is kind of acting as a like a sine wave oscillator. It's not going to be a perfect sine wave, obviously, because it's a recording. So it sounds kind of like this by itself. Of course, there's some additional effects and OTT on it, so that's why it sounds so kind of gritty just on its own. I turn that stuff off. Oh, I've got the mid and the noise in there still. Okay. So, that's the sub. Let's turn this stuff back on. Okay, so for the mid layer, I'm using the sample from Tim C and just sort of this section of it here. It's just kind of a weird sound. So that's, looks like I had put a phaser and chorus on there, but ended up taking them off. And then there's, the high pass filter, which is filtering out the lows so that it doesn't and it has the high pass filter so that it doesn't interfere with the lows of the sub. And of course, some distortion. And then the noise layer was actually muted. I ended up not using it. But I was using the sample from Evergreen Deer. So that one was pretty noisy. And so whenever I needed to use noise, I would usually just use a sample instead. So that was the deer sound, but again, it's not being used in this one. For this fill sound, I'm just using pitch automation to kind of do the bends for it. And that's about it. Yeah. When I move into this next section, you can see I have some automation on the EQ Plus, and all that this is doing is, putting a low pass filter on and, adding some resonance, and that just makes it more usable as just sort of bass instrument. So next we've got the pluck bass, which again I'm using the same sub as the previous bass and using the same sample from Tim C, though I think I'm using a different section of it. I don't think I've actually played the Tim C one. Okay, yeah, so it's chickens. Um, so with this, I really just changed the envelopes to make it more of a plucky sound. And if we hear this on its own, I'm doing some pitch automation here with an envelope um, just to get more of a plucky sound. And this one is also set to cycles mode. So even though it's scanning through the sample, it's taking little slices of it to keep it in key or in tune rather. And then for that one, I've just applied some kind of creative EQ just to bring out some of the overtones and then some distortion. And this one goes into a kind of disperser effect, which is really just a phaser, but with the minimum and maximum values set to the same. And this allows it to basically do the same thing that a disperser plugin would do. And then that goes into a bit crusher with some fold distortion on it, some more distortion. This mid side is just cutting out the lows in the side channel to make sure that the bass stays mono or more mono. And then, of course, OTT and an overdrive. And then this EQ is added for some automation to be done. Looks like primarily just for the opening section, just to thin it out so that when the bass does come in for the, I guess, the drop, that it would have more of an impact. This one does use the noise, and so this is just adding some additional kind of grit. So if I play it by itself, let's go over here. And then adding in the noise. I'm not even sure I hear the difference. Okay, yeah, you can hear it a little bit. So it's just a little additional something. Next I have the AM bass, which is just amplitude modulation. Again, it's built off of the same sub bass. It looks like the same Tim C sample, but also a different section of it. And then it looks like I took the noise out of this one as well. The processing on this one's a little different. So it looks like I had removed that EQ. The distortion is still there. And then it looks like I've added a comb filter, which is probably key tracked. Yeah, it's assigned to the key tracking, and that's just to bring out more of a pitch from the sample. And then we've got the high pass filter again to avoid interfering with the sub. We go into a bit crusher, some more distortion, this mid-side processing again to narrow the stereo width in the bass. And then, of course, OTT, a clipper, And then this one's got the disperser at the end. This sound is like this. That reminds me. Yeah, so this is the kind of amplitude modulation part of it. There's just an LFO that is set to the same rate as the pitch, and then that is modulating the volume down. And so if we were to turn that off, Jesus Christ, pretty noisy. But with it on, it's a little bit more controlled and it has a really nice texture to it. Here's what these samples sound like. Moonbug submitted some samples that were very sort of electronic sounding. And so I actually ended up not really processing them that much. You can see here I've added a convolution reverb where I'm using the sample from Deer as the reverb essentially, because it is just kind of this noise in a space. And I thought that, would be a fun way to use a sample in kind of an unusual way. But here's what those sound like. Yeah, so lots of cool sounds there. This was the original. So lots of really fun sounds in that one. For the most part, I think I just did some time stretching on them and I adjusted the pitch. This one is from Johnny's, but I ran it through a granular effect plugin and some reverb. There it goes. And this was just set to a preset and just kind of a regular reverb. So his original sample was just guitar, I believe. Yeah, so I just kind of ran it through some stuff and used it as kind of an atmospheric layer. And that sidechained the kick, which is why you hear that kind of pumping sound. Next, we have a sample from Echo. And this one was, I think, also a guitar, but with a lot more effects on them. It's a nice texture, and so I believe I just pitched it and shortened it. I don't think there's much else on here. There's some distortion and some reverb, as well as an OTT, but that's about it. And this is for the kind of bass sliding effect. So just kind of a pitch drop on the sound, and I think overall it was, yeah, I just turned it up. Then I created an instrument out of one of the samples from Momo, where you can see I just took a slice of it, tuned it, and this one is also set to cycles mode, but this is what this one sounds like. So very bell-like sound. And as far as the processing, applied some filtering on the highs and lows, did some, or added some distortion. This is a soft clipping, chorus, delay, reverb. Really, kind of basic stuff. Next, we have this sound, which it looks like also came from Rafa. These were pretty good to use because they were very tonal, and so it made it easy to, try to convert these into instruments. And I tried not to over-process them because I did want to retain, the character of the original samples. And that's something that I've had issues with before. You can throw a million effects on things to turn anything into anything, but then what you start to hear after a while is just the sound of the effects, and you don't really hear the original sound anymore. So I'm trying to get better at that, keeping the original character. But anyway, here's what this one sounds like. So just kind of a flute. There's a little bit of soft clipping here and a reverb. And a little bit of filtering on the highs here. And that's about it. So it looks like I did use Johnny's sample as an instrument as well. Again, nothing too crazy, just looped a section of it, tuned it, ran it through a batch of kind of filters and spatial effects, and then a reverb. And then it looks like I removed some of the low end as well. Okay, so on to the drums. The kick is pretty much just from Jenna Badger's sample. Hers was very percussive already, so it was pretty easy to convert this one over into a kick drum. So here's what the original sample was like. It's like you can already hear it's got kind of a body to it. There's, you know, a transient. So really just set a starting point, added a pitch envelope, and then some distortion, some EQing to kind of shape the sound of it. And then I use this sort of disperser effect, which kind of enhances the kind of pitch drop sound at the beginning. And then distortion. So here's what that one sounds like. And if we were to take the disperser off, it's pretty subtle change, but I think it gives it more impact. I don't know. What do you think? All right, so that was the kick. And then we have the first snare, which was made up from samples by Viantria and Contour. So this is the this is the sneeze sound. And then Contour's sample was a lot of kind of metallic hits. So I layered those two things together, starting with Viantria's. I don't remember what note I was playing. But anyway, you get a couple of good sounds in there. So we've got a pitch envelope, again, to emphasize the transient, and then some shaping of it, of the envelope, some EQ to kind of bring out some resonances around 300 hertz. Looks like 314 here, and then another one just because. Then we have just transient control, which is just boosting the transient a bit more and pushing that into a distortion. And then I added a delay and then a high cut for some automation that happens in the track. So without the delay, it sounds like this. Kind of like the way that the delay gives it a bit of a bounce. And then with Contour's portion of it, I liked that the sounds that he had were very kind of metallic, and I thought maybe I could bring some of that metallic texture into the snare sound. So this one looks like I just took out the width and then also boosted some resonances around 300. I don't know if that was a good idea, but whatever, it's done. And yeah, so that one sounds like this. And then with those two things combined, they go into a compressor to sort of help bring the sounds together. And then I have a transient split with a Haas effect applied to the transients, and that just, you know, gives the transient some stereo width. And then some EQ to clean it up, and some clipping with over. So altogether, okay, the next snare is Jenna Badger sample and deer, evergreen deer. So kind of a similar setup to the kick drum, but obviously, you know, we went with some different processing. We're also playing it at a, you know, higher pitch. So this one has some resonances around 300, which is usually where I like to place my snares. I also brought up the highs just to give it some air and to bring out the noise a bit more. In this chain, there's a vocoder. You'll notice that the sample for deer is muted here, and that's because I'm using it as the carrier for the vocoder in order to bring in some noise. And yeah, then I just kind of blend that in. We've got another transient control, distortion, and in this instance, we have a ring mod, and then clipping and reverb. So this one sounds like this. Versus, so I think this one's a little bit darker and noisier than the other snare, which is a bit more metallic. And obviously this one doesn't have like the delay effect or anything like that. So this one's more of a straightforward snare sound. Next up is Capri GP. This is just kind of some metallic noise. Sort of using that like a ride or a hi-hat, just kind of going on in the background, keeping time. As far as processing, there's a ring mod, which is always good for bringing out kind of different metallic timbres in higher frequencies. There's a gate, it looks like, which probably is just to tighten things up. Yeah, makes it a little bit more percussive. Looks like I boosted the volume and added a Haas effect. Eric's, I used his sample a couple of times, mostly for background things. Just added a chorus to give it some width, and then I picked a random preset in Infiltrator and ended up with this sound. And then I use it again for kind of I guess you could call it a riser. It's more just kind of like a scream before the next drop. I probably could bounce that out and kind of clean up the tail so it doesn't interfere with everything else, but whatever. Next was one of my own samples, which I had recorded these samples using a bottle of teriyaki sauce. So it was just a bunch of like squishing noises. Here's the original sound. It's just really gross, but I loaded that into a sampler, picked one of the sounds, and then I ran that through Object Delay, which does a bit of physical modeling so that it resonates. It emulates resonating a beam sound, so it sounds a little less squishy and a little bit more like solid. And yeah, added a reverb, and that was really it for this one. So that one sounds like this. Doesn't sound gross at all anymore. Next is another Capri GP sample. This one, I believe I pitched or time stretched. Yeah, I did a lot of time stretching on this one in order to make a sort of crash sound. This one sounds like this. So yeah, that one just had some EQ to remove the lower frequencies, a ring mod, some distortion, clipping, and reverb. And that's it for that, yeah. The Capri GP sound, yeah, it was this beginning part of it here. So I just took this part here and stretched it out. Then started adding in just a little bit more details towards the end. This was the sample from Momo, which again, I've removed the width, added another ring mod, a little bit of transient shaping and clipping. And that makes this sound. This is really just to kind of add some more energy to the final drop. Last was Capri GP again, and I think I just took one of the metal sounds and used it again to kind of increase the energy for this final stretch. So this one was like this. Yeah, so that's all the sound design for this track. And go ahead and play it from the beginning. The end. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope that maybe you found something useful or interesting here. Let me know what you think down in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next video.